din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și scut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce-nseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de plin l-am priceput, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut.
оклад. И нас не согреет треск речей под барабанный раскат. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий род, потому что рабочий ты сам. И так как все мы люди, то должны мы, извините, что-то есть. Хотят накормить нас пустой болтовней, чертям спасибо за честь. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий род, потому что рабочий ты сам. И так как ты рабочий, то не жди, что нам поможет другой. Себе мы свободу добудем твою своей рабочей рукой. Марш левый, два, три, марш левый, два, три, встать ряды, товарищ нам. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий род, потому что рабочий ты сам. Guten Platz in der See ist. Bring dich ein in der Arbeit der Einheitsbrust, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist. Ты войдешь в наш единый рабочий род, потому что рабочий ты сам. Rein dich ein in der Arbeit der Einheitsbrust, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Sretna pod suncem, rasti u jaslama dječjim, rasti i cvijetaj zemljo ravnih ljudi, i neka mir nad tvojim ljudima vlada, mir tvojim lađama napuči i tvome danu što se vedar budi. Rasti sretna da svi narodi vide, sa strana svih, sa juga i sjevera, kako se rađa i kako se voli, kako se brani zemlja proletera. Pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Rasti cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Sreći u vodi i u zraku, u pjesmi strojeva i u sjaju žita. Rasti i cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i pod srcem Tita. Rasti i cvjetaj pod zvijezdom slobode, pod rukom partije i При новостях в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, реют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы. Будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы. Милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome along. It is the evening of the 17th of February 2026, and here we are with a live stream where we once again dive into the innards of the decaying empire and pull out the gizzards to see if we can discern the future. We are, of course, referring to the sacred arts and ancient art of soothsaying, which we will be engaging in political soothsaying tonight, perhaps, but hopefully with a good degree more accuracy. So before we begin, be sure to like and share the stream if you have not done so already. For those of you who were asking, the individual in the AI artwork on the pre-stream artwork, shall we say, was a certain Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is, of course, the Israeli Minister for Torture, Degradation, Humiliation, and Sadism, or as he's better known, the Minister of Prisons. And I figured that a good way of introducing any talk about Palestine was to show him looking as ridiculous as possible. I mean, he already looks ridiculous because he is, of course, the Kurdish Peter Griffin. Look it up. It's uncanny. And the man he's shouting at is, of course, representative of a calm and determined and still dignified Palestinian prisoner, which I think does clearly show the dichotomy between the colonizer and the colonized, or at least the resistance of the colonized. The colonizer will always be more afraid. The colonizer will always be more terrified, and will always be a less dignified figure than those who resisted, no matter what tortures and humiliations that he can inflict upon his prisoners. He'll always remain a squalid, terrified, and grotesque creature, loathed even by other colonialists. But moving to the subject at hand, which is, of course, Trump's Board of Peace, which I predicted a while ago will disintegrate into nothingness before too long, and is actually about, well, more than anything else, it's about an attempt by Trump to set up his own United Nations. But more than anything else, it's a grift. And this is the thing you have to understand about a lot of the motivations of Trump and his circle personally. Now, I'm not talking about, because the wider motivations of the US imperialists as a ruling class, that's of course different. But the motivations of Trump personally, because many thousands and thousands of hours have been poured into trying to understand the motivations of Trump, they're really quite simple, which is that Trump's a grifter, Trump's a con man, Trump's a robber, and a lot of what he does is just gouging. It's just cheap opportunism. It's just cheap criminality, which is what the Board of Peace is. It's criminality on a bigger scale because it has the state, the United States government behind it. But in reality, all it is about glossing over pure theft. The theft, of course, by the Zionists of Palestinian land. That's the biggest element of it. But also theft on a more petty scale, like the extorting of money from the countries who queue up. Well, queue up would be to put too grand a title on it. Those who accept Donald Trump's invitation to join this so-called Board of Peace have to pay a certain amount of money, a very large amount of money, in order to get onto it. And so that's what a lot of this is really about. This is about gouging money out of people, which is what an awful lot of Trump's policies are about. I mean, so on a bigger scale, that's what his visits to South Korea and Japan are about, gouging money out of them, which nominally is going to be invested in the economy of the internal economy of the United States. But Trump thinks like a mid-level gangster, which is that he's going to gouge he's going to wet his beak, to quote Don Cheech in Godfather 2. And that's the limit of his scheme. He will enrich himself, and the thinking doesn't really go much beyond that. See, what you've got to remember is that Donald Trump, even though he was at some stage in his life a good bullshit artist, was always a bad businessman. He was never good. I mean, he inherited nearly $1 billion from his father and turned it into much less than that. He has singularly failed at every single enterprise he has ever engaged in. What he's been good at is evading prison time and making sure that the bankruptcies fall on other people's shoulders and not his own. So he's a schemer, he's a scammer, he's a weasel, a particularly obese weasel, but a weasel nonetheless. I think the technical term for weasels is a mustard. Now, so the Board of Peace is there principally to try and push forward this sort of Jared Kushner, who, by the way, Trump's idiot son-in-law, another complete failure of a man, the thin white puke, so to speak, a man whose sole achievement in life is being the son of another scam artist, Charles Kushner, who went to prison for trying to blackmail his own brother-in-law. Look it up, it's true. But also for owning a property with the house number 666 on it, and the Saudis then, to buy influence with the Trump inner circle, purchased that property off him. So his sole achievement is being Trump's son-in-law. And so this bunch of absolute scam artists, this bunch of twisted failures, has put together this board of peace, which the various US puppet states have essentially paid a bribe to Trump to enter. And it's meant to supervise the ongoing Israeli destruction of Gaza. Now, the Israeli regime has just issued a demand for the full disarmament of Hamas, at the same time as this same Israeli regime is increasing its aggression and its theft of Palestinian land in the West Bank. Now, they've issued this demand for the disarmament of Hamas, which I will say now is something that will absolutely not happen. If anything, Hamas's status amongst the Palestinians has been enormously raised by the last almost 3 years now. And so disarming Hamas is not something that Israel can really do, nor can Israel, even for all their boasting, currently control even the areas that they claim to be occupying at the moment in Gaza. Nor is it the case that the Gaza war, for all the slaughter and chaos they created, it went particularly well for them. The even very reactionary Israeli retired officers admit that the performance of the IDF was incredibly poor on the ground. Other foreign military observers who aren't just doing propaganda for Israel also are obliged to admit just how poorly trained, poorly motivated, badly led the IDF really is. So they are now waving their fists and issuing threats. But the truth is, the only thing the IDF is actually good at is brutalizing civilians, kicking people off their land in the service of Israeli settlers, and also acting basically as a police force. So the IDF cannot fight and beat Hamas. I should say more broadly, the Palestinian resistance movements. They tried over and over again. Every time they got involved in a direct fight, they lost that fight. The only reason they managed to get anywhere was because they essentially leveled large areas of Gaza through aerial bombardment and artillery fire. Every time they got into a gunfight with the Palestinian resistance factions, they lost. Their men panicked and ran away. And it's part of the reason why they're now afflicted by a far bigger outbreak of suicides than the Israeli government is prepared to admit. So this board of peace is a scam. It is a Trump scam on a par with, well, actually much bigger than Trump University, but basically the same thinking exists behind both. And the fools who are paying Trump billions of dollars in order to gain entry into this think that they're going to get something out of paying him. Well, as everybody who went to Trump University will discovered, so will the likes of Kazakhstan and others who presumably paid to go onto this thing, which is, even if you pay Donald Trump large amounts of money, doesn't mean he's going to give you anything. And this board of peace will end in a farce. It'll dissolve with no achievements to its name. The only thing it will succeed in doing is further undermining the United Nations. And for that, we should all be truly thankful. Again, with the thing with Trump is sometimes he achieves something by accident. Now, I will just go through some comments. I've got various emails from people who've, if you've emailed me over the past couple of weeks to the right address, the chances are I do have it. I've just not had time to respond. So just to answer that comment, I will be returning to answer comments when I have a moment. So we are currently live on YouTube and on Rumble and on Twitch and Substack and X, of course. So be sure to subscribe to all those platforms if you have not done so already. You never know when they're going to try to plug on any one of us. So let's just go through here. Now, there's a bit of a problem on Rumble at the moment because it keeps defaulting back to the old channel, not the new one, but I need to sort that out. So let's just go through some chats to say hello. Right. Okay. Right. So we've got President Jesus, Sid Hatfield, Walter Stolzing, Guy Schurer from Brazil, Peep Show from London, Working Prole Incorporated from Vienna, Hillside Coda from Serbia. We have Petar Nikolov. We have Rob the Slav on Rumble. We have Speedy Bozo from, is that Northern Pennsylvania? We have Nush82 from the US puppet state of Australia. We have Callum Roche. We have Lone Bart. We have Iris Crocus from West Wales. We have Pavel from Austria. We have Comrade Jawad. We have David Ball. We have beloved Aunt Wab. We have Alan Smith in Georgia, USA. So listening to this while serving the corporate masters. Hopefully your shift ends soon, comrade. We have RBU from Western Australia, getting quite a few Australians on these streams at the moment. Always good to see you. Apparently, I have a long-lost selection of relatives in Australia who were packed off there in a unnamed family disgrace over a century ago. So God knows what that was. We have Winston Fahrenheit. We have Alex Oliveira from Sao Paulo, Brazil. We have Nikki. We have ACDT. We have David King. We have Bruce Albert. Jessica Fit, hello to you. We have Sid, who says their prisons are particularly barbaric, as detailed in Trotskyist Ralph Schönman's excellent book. Is that the Israeli prison system? Interesting. I'll have to look that book up. Nush82 says Trump is being goaded and ushered towards onwards by the US ruling clique. None of the US Democrats uttered anything in opposition to these ideas. Well, yes. Well, the Trump administration now is basically no different to what a Jeb Bush administration would have been, or a Mitt Romney administration would have been. It's basically just the standard Republican Party, but with MAGA branding. There's no real difference between the Trump presidency and what any other standard Republican would have done. No real difference at all. Hello to Almir as well. Any thoughts on Jesse Jackson? Yes, he's just passed away, I believe. Well, not really. I mean, I studied the Rainbow Coalition back when I was a master's student many years ago now, 20 years ago now. It was interesting. I mean, he was an interesting figure. I don't know how close he did come to getting the Democratic Party nomination, but I think he was a more radical figure in every respect than the likes of Bernie Sanders ever was. His Rainbow Coalition was probably more radical and more interesting than the Sanders campaign. He took more of a anti-imperialist stance than any of the US Soc Dems now has done. I mean, admittedly, in the end, I mean, because he ran in the Democratic Party and then refused to do the obvious thing after he after the Democratic Party did him over. He refused to do the obvious thing, which was to take as much of his coalition as possible and then launch a third party outside of the Democrats. I strongly suspect that anybody who tries to launch a third party to the left of the Democrats in a serious fashion will probably find himself in prison or dead pretty soon. But that is the obvious move that needs to be made, that has needed to be made for quite some time, which is that the US left remains a willing prisoner of the Democratic Party. And Jackson, I think, my memory of the Rainbow Coalition is based on an essay I wrote years ago on religion in American politics in the 80s, which was over 20 years ago now, and also the writing on it done by, of all people, Hunter S. Thompson. So forgive me if there's gaps in my knowledge here, But the Rainbow Coalition was something which was, I think, more genuinely radical and had probably more roots in the American working class than anything Sanders did. And there is, I mean, Jackson had, I mean, he was, of course, an old associate of Martin Luther King. He was with King when King was assassinated all the way back in the late 60s. So he had that, he had a certain amount of, so we say, fame from that. He had, being a man who knew and worked with Martin Luther King gave him a great degree of credibility. And perhaps knowing King's fate was part of the reason why Jackson didn't leave the Democratic Party. And in the end, he ended up endorsing various Democratic Party presidents, such as Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, who, by the way, is and was and will always be until his dying breath an inveterate racist. There's absolutely no doubt about that. I mean, people say that his sister soldier moment was all about proving himself to the reactionaries. No, that's what Bill Clinton really thinks of black people. Bill Clinton is an embittered, absolute racist. And the fact that he doesn't wear a white sheet or have an SS tattoo anywhere visible anyway doesn't make him less of one. Because, I mean, he enjoyed humiliating Jesse Jackson. And Jesse Jackson should have, at that point, got up and left the Democratic Party and never come back. Because for all of the woke twisting and turning and posturing that the Democratic Party does engage in, it's still a party of American imperialism, which makes it at root again a bone deep racist party, just as much as the Republicans are. It's just that the Republicans like to pander to racism, whereas the Democrats like to pretend that they're not racists, but they are. They are unavoidably and irredeemably racist. Walter says, no, he was the first black president. He played a saxophone. Yes. Callum Roche says, Clinton knowingly brought in the free strikes law for the prison industrial complex. Yeah, look, the Democratic Party passed like Biden's crime bill, and Clinton ran on this as well. Clinton ran on demonizing black people, demonizing black people specifically using fear of crime. Now, of course, you know, there are black people, mainly men, who commit crimes. There's no point pretending otherwise. But it's also the case that Biden, Clinton, and the Democratic Party leadership sought to pin the various waves of crime in the 80s and the 90s purely on black people, particularly drug-related crime, narcotics-related crime. When, of course, the major source of narcotics that come into the United States, of course, is either the US government itself or those who are aligned with its intelligence services. Same is true for most of the major imperialist countries. The biggest importer of opiates into Britain, for instance, I'm willing to take a bet right now, is the security services, and they were getting it for many years, from Afghanistan. Now, I've seen reports that are at the moment more speculative than factual, but there's a lot of smoke to this particular fire. But there is some fire there, which suggests that what part of the reason for the long-term occupation of Afghanistan, part of the motivation of the intelligence services was that it was a ready source of the opium manufacture, opium growth and export. And that was, again, part of how the various intelligence services of the imperialist powers financed their off-the-books operations by drug dealing. Certainly true for the CIA, very true for MI6, who've been at it for much longer even than the CIA. So to go back to the point about Biden and good old Bill, I'm tough on crime, but I'm also black. To pin it on like street level drug dealers or street level gangs, which is what the propaganda engaged in by Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, and the entire US political establishment suggested was the problem, was essentially just racist pandering. And that's that more than anything else, even more. I mean, with Biden, I mean, God, I mean, the man was born with. If he wasn't in the KKK, he was friends with an awful lot of people who either were or were heavily associated with it. That the crime bill should have made sure that Biden didn't get a single vote from anybody who considered themselves even a liberal. But of course, because Democratic Party voters are a bunch of labor aristocracy and petty bourgeois fools, Biden, of course, did get votes, if indeed you regard any of the primaries in the Democratic Party in 2020 as being fairly conducted, which personally I don't. However, the point about to go back to the point about Clinton and the rather interesting digression we've got into here. The point about Billy Boy Clinton and the point about Jesse Jackson was that Jesse Jackson was not a dumb man. Jesse Jackson was a very intelligent man. Jesse Jackson was a very effective organizer. He could have led, again, his Rainbow Coalition against the Democratic Party, but he chose not to. And part of that is perhaps fear. Part of that is political limitations of him as an individual. And also part of it is the sheer incapacity of the American left. And this is a problem which, I mean, if you're watching from the United States, as many of you are, I mean, you're not alone in this problem. All the imperialist countries, because of the repression of the communist parties, the suppression of Marxism-Leninism, not just by the state, but by the compatible imperialist left and by the revisionists, it's left us in a disastrous situation. Had there been an organized Marxist-Leninist force inside the United States in the late 80s that was capable of holding together a national organization, then there's a chance that Jackson and people like that could have been pressured or persuaded into actually launching an independent force. Because if an independent force, an independent workers' party, should we say, inside any country in imperialism, it is possible to launch such a thing, but it's only possible to do it with a very tough Marxist-Leninist spine to it, so it can stand up to all the machinations of the state and also stand up to the foolishness, individualistic nonsense of the left. No such force exists. And so you have anybody who emerges, like Jackson, has to deal with or be part of the pre-existing left, which is by its very nature weak and very treacherous. So Jackson, very intelligent man, very capable campaigner, politically limited, and that is ultimately his tragedy, which is like he had a once in a generation opportunity to break with a Democratic Party that by the end of the 80s was loathed and increasingly becoming more loathed by the American working class. But again, due to all the limitations we've discussed, he didn't take that opportunity. And so the American working class remains shackled to the still twitching corpse of the Democratic Party. And the break with it still needs to occur. So, thanks. Congratulations on the new child. Well, thank you very much. Someone's asked, about Marco Rubio. Well, Marco Rubio and the Munich speech. I'll talk a little bit about that. I think we should all write a note of thanks to Marco Rubio, because I tell you this much, with a few changes, that was a speech that could have been given by a Marxist-Leninist. Because Rubio, this is the reason, by the way, the Europeans are whining and bitching about his speech. Because like with the rest of the Trump administration, in a crisis, the inner nature, the core of something is finally revealed. So you can see individuals who face a moment of danger, like something fundamental about them is revealed. The nations, states which go into a crisis reveal their core. And because of the crisis of US imperialism, slowly its core was revealed. And this has been again, we go back to Trump in 2016. What's the biggest objection that the liberals in the United States actually have about Trump? What is it that makes them really angry? It's that he gives the game away too much. Whereas, like we mentioned before, Jeb Bush or Mitt Romney would do many of the same things, but would stand there and give long-winded justifications invoking human rights, and they would cry and say it was about freedom for the Cuban people or Iranian people or Venezuelans, and it was a sacred cause of liberty, that the torch that was lit by George Washington has been passed from president to president. And now I'll break into an American accent. The torch that was lit by George Washington over 250 years ago has been passed from president to president to president. And now I take up that torch of liberty, and I will light the beacon, and it will shine forth across the lands, and it will illuminate the Cuban people who are bursting at the walls of the Cuban prison, and they are crying one word over and over again, and that is freedom. It's easy to do these things. I mean, being a scriptwriter for an American president is a piece of piss. But they would have preferred that. The liberals, if they they want their imperialism, but it's very important for them to have it dressed up like that, to have it layered in bullshit, basically. Trump, and this is, perhaps this is the dialectic in action. Trump has spent his career essentially as a bullshit artist. And it's funny because it takes just a pure bullshit artist to strip away all of that, all of the addition of the actual bullshit. So Rubio goes to Munich and basically tells the truth, which is strange. He goes there and he says that I can't do a Marco Rubio impression just yet. I haven't taken that much MDMA. But he goes there and he tells the truth, which is that he says that that the US is the leader of the West, which is true. Now, again, this is why the Europeans get very upset, because, again, Trump reminds them of the reality, which is that and again, the George W. Bush administration did this to an extent as well, but Trump's even more crude about it. He reminds them of the reality that they only exist as imperialist powers precisely because the US essentially bailed them out at the end of World War II. The US guaranteed the survival of the capitalist classes in Germany, Italy, France, to Spain and Portugal as well, Britain as well, the Nordic countries too. The US guaranteed the survival of the ruling classes of these nations. They underwrote their survival. And in return, they have been part of the US-led bloc ever since. And Trump, it never tires of reminding them of this. Whereas any other president, like Obama or something, would talk about, I will try an Obama impression. We'll talk about things like, we stood together many years ago. I can't do it. The Obama impression is not quite there yet. Work in progress. He'll talk about how we were there together on the beaches of Normandy, and we have joined hands against tyranny ever since. So the compulsion is there, but it's layered under a load of bullshit icing, shall we say. But again, like Rubio comes up and he says it's a tragedy that the Western empires ever started to go into retreat, and he correctly blames godless communism for it. And this is, of course, something which is very true. Rubio correctly identifies godless communism as being one of the causes of Western retreat. Now, of course, because he's a fool, he doesn't understand the full reasons behind Western retreat. The very fact that there was World War I even occurred in the first place was due to the inherent contradictions and antagonisms existing within the imperialist system, which could not be resolved in any other way other than a global conflagration. But the Bolshevik Revolution of October 1917 haunts Rubio and all the other petty reactionaries to this day, because he correctly identifies something in his speech, which is that was the moment when essentially naked colonialism was finished. Because what does that do? Suddenly, it inspires every anti-imperialist freedom fighter for many generations to come, suddenly sees that the oppressors can be cast off. Suddenly they take inspiration from the Bolshevik Revolution. The biggest inspiration and most immediate inspiration went to the Chinese, of course, who had all of their debts written off by the Bolsheviks that the Chinese had imposed on them by the Tsardom, and also the Soviets gave up all land claims against the Chinese, and suddenly there was a clear path to not only challenging the oppressor but beating them, and that inspired generation after generation of anti-colonial revolt. World War II, and again, this is where we get into some of the opinions of like Western reactionaries about World War II. A lot of them, if you look at the likes of Peter Hitchens or Colonel Douglas MacGregor, a lot of them at heart hate the fact that World War II ever happened, because they correctly, from their point of view and from our point of view as well, they correctly identify that as being like the death knell for like the British Empire and the French Empire, and another defeat for colonialism, because that was followed by the anti-colonial revolution, which again drew from the inspiration of the Bolshevik Revolution, and also was powered onwards by the victory of the Chinese Revolution. So again, Rubio is reflecting when he laments the decline of the Western empires, and again he reflects that for 500 years the West continually expanded, and now it's been in retreat. Now Rubio puts this partly down to godless communism, partly down to woke stuff and whatever other stupid shit that he blames for it. But fundamentally, he's telling a version of the truth now, which is that the US aims to reverse the defeat of the West, and the European powers must join in helping to reverse that. Now this, I think, this provides us with perfect, brilliant clarity about how things are going to proceed from here. Because we have Rubio, and again, this isn't just rhetoric from them, this is the reality. The reality is that US imperialism, if it is to renew itself, must defeat Russia and China and Iran. It must destroy those nation states. It must destroy the Communist Party of China. It must destroy Khomeinism, and it must destroy the current Russian state if it is to survive. It has to be able to open up not only these countries for asset stripping, but also all the countries that do business with them. It has to restore the dollar-led system. It has to push everybody back inside the prison house of nations that was the dollar-led international trading system. That's the only way it's going to be able to restore itself. It can't restore itself via reindustrializing. That is, if you read, for instance, particularly Capital Volume 2 and Capital Volume 3, you can see within that why, and part of the reason why it is so difficult for the US imperialists and the other imperialist powers to reindustrialize, which is that imperialism has degenerated to the point where serious long-term capital investments are just not profitable enough anymore. So investing in mines, investing in steel mills, investing in production lines, it's just not profitable. It's just not profitable enough to make that huge outlay that would be required to reindustrialize. It's not going to happen. They can't do it. So that leaves the imperialists with only really one option, which is that they have to keep pushing and pressurizing Russia, China, and Iran, trying to split them apart, trying to take each of them individually, trying to ruin them internally. And Rubio is essentially saying he's telling the truth to his European audience, which is that if you wish to survive, you have to join with us in actually this crusade against the enemies of the West. And again, he is correct from their point of view. He's telling them the truth. Now, they gave him a standing ovation. Then they sort of bitched and moaned about it afterwards, because what he said is correct, which is that the European and American bloc and I included in that Canada, Australia, and New Zealand as well, Five Eyes plus Europe. They stand and fall together. They really do. The French, the Germans, the Italians, the Spanish, the British, all stand and fall with the US-led global order. And the only chance the US-led global order has of renewing itself is if it crushes all alternatives to its system. So that means the international settlement has to be pushed back into only being in dollars. That, by the way, is part of the ridiculous psyop they've been trying over the Witkoff-Dmitriev negotiations in recent days, saying that the Russians are going back into the dollar system. It isn't actually true. For starters, Peskov, the Kremlin press secretary, said, well, it wasn't the Russians who refused to use the dollar, it was the Americans who sanctioned them out of it, believing it would cause severe economic problems. But of course it didn't, and then that led to a degree of desperation. So this is the problem that they have. They need to push everybody back inside the US-led international system. And so it's rather ironic that one of the things that Rubio was bitching about was how everybody had given up their sovereignty to international institutions. Well, that's not essentially true. Most of the international institutions that do exist are run out of the West and were founded by the US and the British for the specific purpose of setting up international trading systems that would keep capital flowing into London and New York. So it's like, well, you know, the international institutions are yours, Marco, so what are you complaining about? Now, so I think everybody should watch or read Rubio's speech. I think it should be studied. I think it should be something which is shown to everybody who doubts what the US-led order is all about. Now, I will counterpose it because it's not really in opposition to. It's been shown as by the media, by the bourgeois press as being, oh, Rubio and AOC give competing visions. They weren't competing visions. It's the same vision, but with different tactics. So whereas Rubio talks about the glory of the West, the Western explorers, Western priests, etc., taking the glories of Western civilization to the savage corners of the world, whereas AOC goes there and essentially just says the same thing, but in different language. So whereas Rubio is crude, AOC dresses it up. And by the way, she came across as profoundly stupid. Like, this is the thing you find about the most of the politicians in the imperialist systems. They're all profoundly stupid. There's not a single one of them who would be who even constitutes a particularly clever reactionary. AOC is a dimwit, but she's a dimwit who basically just confirmed that the left in the United States is as committed to the project of US imperialism as the American right wing is. Because what she did was she went and said a lot of the same things, but the language was different. She went up and she complained about authoritarianism with a few sly digs at Trump. But in reality, who's she talking about? She's talking about Russia. She's talking about China. She's talking about Iran, mainly, others as well, maybe, and also the DPRK. So this is standard social democrat language and has been for over 100 years. And she's talking about standing up to these right-wing authoritarians. And how does she propose to do that? Well, she proposes to do that via the medium of strengthening the international institutions, meaning NATO, meaning the EU, meaning IMF, World Bank, etc. as well. So what she's doing, whereas Rubio's going up there and saying, you must join us in a holy crusade against communism, because that's the way he chooses to express it. AOC is saying almost exactly the same thing, but it's just wrapped up in this language about human rights and democracy and rule of law, none of which is remotely serious. And Rubio is probably a good deal more intelligent than AOC, perhaps, but then again, that's not particularly hard. There are concussed spiders out there that are more intelligent than AOC. The other point to make is that again, this isn't new. This is the same speech that someone like Bernie Sanders would give, with a few twists. It's the similar speech to that which Jeremy Corbyn would have given. Again, like the left and the right in the imperialist systems come at this from slightly different angles, but it's the same. It's the same basic message. It's the same basic message behind the bullshit, which is that they must have a revival of imperialism. Imperialism needs to revive itself. Rubio will seek to revive it by waving the flag and declaring wars or campaigns of aggression against various different people to try and get what they want. He'll do it more openly. AOC will do it, do the same thing, but with slightly different tactics, ultimately to the same end. So look at the two speeches side by side. You can see that these are just two people inside the same system, both needing a revival of imperialism, both desperate to defend the dollar-led system, but doing it using slightly different language, and they'll argue over the language. This is the nature of bourgeois politics. So far from giving a working class vision, what AOC gives the Munich Security Conference is the vision of the labor aristocracy. By the way, if they run her for president, then these people are even stupider than I thought they were, because she's on the same. She's not quite as drunk as Kamala Harris. Give her time, she'll get there. But she's almost as stupid. I mean, then again, look at who are they going to run? They're going to run fucking Vampire Newsom, who at least is slimy enough to sort of ooze his way through interviews while saying nothing of substance. I mean, AOC just comes across as a raving dimwit. I'm sure Newsom is too, but he's just a better liar. So let's go back to the comments here. Sid says, as soon as they had to vacate their presence around the Golden Triangle, they took up presence in Afghanistan during the 70s. That's true of the CIA and others. Walter says, Biden stood up against Corn Pop, though. Corn Pop was a bad dude. Yeah. Did we ever find Corn Pop? That's an interesting question. I remember that. I mean, why Biden? Well, Biden's brain was, I think, turned into Insta mash by that stage. But why he thought that it was a good idea to talk about like a confrontation he had with a black guy around what was presumably a whites-only swimming pool in the early 60s in like Delaware or Rhode Island or wherever the fuck it is he's from. Quite why he thought that was a good idea, I'm not sure. Hello to Sophia. Hello to Leslie from Phuket, Thailand. Interesting. Michael McGoldrick, hello to you. Angry Prole, yes, I got your email. I will be responding to emails hopefully this week sometime. Bruce Albert says, big problem with the Rainbow Coalition was focused on ID politics, not economics or class. Alas, in 90s, socialism was an absolute nadir. Jesse Jackson was a prisoner of that time. Good points. Hello to Ash, joining us from the other side of the world. Alan says, the US left is so individualistic and anarchic, they're barely different from the don't tread on me people. Yeah, it's basically they're the don't tread on me people with blue hair and rainbow flags. There you go. Angry Prole says, all liberals, libertarians, conservatives, Republicans think they're informed, but they're not, as all supporters of capitalism and the corrupt power structure lie, whether they know it or not. Now, I hope you all enjoyed the generic American president impression. Free Palestine 800 says, with Trump, the empire is naked. Indeed. Somebody says which impression still sounded Scottish. I see. The thing is, I'm not aware of having a Scottish accent, but then again, I'm aware that I've been here for a year now, so my accent might have changed because, of course, the more you mix with people who only speak with one accent, the more your accent kind of wanders. But it'd be interesting to see if I'm getting more Scottish as time goes by. Right. Sid says, the initial plan was for the empires to duck under the umbrella of Nazism and retake the motherland, but the inherent contradictions in the system prevented this alliance. Yes, indeed. and the Soviet leadership proved skilled at getting out of the trap that the British and the French imperialists kept trying to lay for them. There's an interesting book which I've just picked up about how Hitler was actually the creation of US and British imperialism, which I think is true to an extent. Certainly the British invested a lot in Hitler's career because they, first and foremost, they wanted to prevent a communist revolution inside Germany, which was eminently possible in the early 1930s. Second of all, they wanted to make sure that any German aggression would be flung at the Soviet Union, which is what the Soviet leadership worked out was what the British's game was, and managed to thwart that game. Angry Proll says, on an unrelated note, with the Epstein files, there's been a renewed interest in Kurt Cobain's death, which was clearly an assassination after he talked about those in power back in the 90s. Yeah, I mean, I never paid much attention to that. I mean, I remember I'm 44 now, so when he died, I would have been 12. I remember like a lot of the girls at school back in '94 came in crying one day because there was a lot of Nirvana fans in my year and the year above in school, and they all wrote Kurt in Tipp-Ex on their school bags and pencil cases. And I wondered what the fuck that was all about because I didn't even know who Kurt Cobain was. But it's interesting. See, given that I used to dismiss like these things as like, well, why on earth would the system kill a fucking singer? Of all, like, why on earth would they why on earth would some MK Ultra guy kill John Lennon? But then you realize that, well, the things that the ruling class engages in, well, they're not. There's a lot of conspiracies, but they're not always in full control of what goes on. So Mark David Chapman was one of the most MK Ultra guys in the universe, and and probably due to being driven mad by MK Ultra experiments, convinced himself that killing John Lennon was a good thing to do. Same is true. I've seen the same thing argued about Hinckley. Now, I'm not convinced about the theories regarding the attempted assassination of Reagan, but then again, ruling class infighting can do a lot of crazy things. But on Cobain, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, he was clearly, from what I can recall, and again, I haven't read up on this for a long time. I remember watching the Nick Broomfield documentary about this, which must be 25 years old by now, where he suggested that Courtney Love basically did it. I've seen some suggestions this week about that Cobain was probably killed by a pair of hitmen, and that Courtney Love, due to the fact that she was basically somebody who was both a victim and a perpetrator in like sex trafficking operations, was caught up in this. Interesting stuff. I mean, I'll need to have a look at it. Maybe I should go back and listen to Nirvana again. I haven't listened to any Nirvana for God knows how many years now. Maybe that's something to look at in the near future. But maybe we should do a music program at some point, because I'm interested as to like, because there's clearly some serious energy that has been put into like controlling the music industry and controlling acts who could be potentially dangerous. So maybe that's something to look into in the near future. Furthermore, says Angry Pole, I recommend the book Drugs as Weapons Against Us, the CIA's Murderous Targeting of SDS, Panthers, Hendrix, Lennon, Cobain, Tupac, and Other Activists by John L. Potash. Yeah, I mean, I'm curious as to, I mean, I will read that. I've heard that Potash is a somewhat controversial figure in like left-wing circles, but isn't he an ex-cop or something? Yeah. If you know anything about him, do drop me a line. Sid says, in the process of reading volume 2 right now, and I'm understanding it rather easily, although it is meticulous reading. Yeah, it's a weird one, volume 2, because I found volume 1 very easy to read. but parts of it I had to read more than once. Volume 2 I find easier to read, but I'm reading it slower. It's very strange. Right. Fei Lu says it is because even when China is playing by their rules, participating in their games, but beating them in their own games. Well, certainly the Chinese are now beating them in the technological stakes now by quite some distance. The US can't compete, so they're trying to sabotage them. President Jesus says Corn Pop was located. I think he was dead. Probably went to prison under Biden's crime bill. Yes, I mean, I admit that the Obama impression did not go well. Going to need to work on that. Yeah. President Jesus says Redacted has an interview with an investigator claims he was killed by two guys from the Screaming Trees. Is that Lanigan? Screaming Trees was Mark Lanigan, wasn't it? If I recall that correctly. I mean, two that they get like two musicians to do it. It seems very on form with kind of some of the low rent bullshit that the American like ruling class engages in. Recommend Dave Whelan's book on John Lennon's murder. Okay, I'll make a note of that. Tupac was a member of the CPUSA. Indeed, he was, but the CPUSA was not up to much at the time. Neither Sirhan nor Chapman were the actual gunmen. So I said, well, that's an interesting question because, like, yeah, the RFK assassination is so dodgy that it's hard to believe that they got away with it, given that there were more bullets found at the scene and in the corpse than Sirhan had in his gun. As for the Lennon assassination, I've never actually looked into it in a serious way. John Coltrane says Hobbes had a convenient overdose at 40 years old. His music was revolutionary and radical. Jimi Hendrix had a convenient overdose at 27. He drew crowds in the hundreds of thousands many, many times. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't rule out like musicians who are using narcotics ending up taking too much. But then again, with the Epstein thing unveiling much of the machinations of the ruling class before us, it's important not to close your mind down. Angry Paul says, have you heard about the shenanigans surrounding Discord and the continued onslaught of what we know as free open internet for the pushing of immense censorship control? I haven't looked into I don't use Discord generally, but look, the Starmer regime is going to try more internet control. I mean, they've been trying this relentlessly for years and years, and so I'll have to look more into that. But every time they try it, there's another way around it. Basically, what they want to do is to have a system where basically they can record everything you say and do online, and then use it against you if you step out of line. Basically, Mohammed says, can you invite Michael Jabara Kali to Decline and Fall to discuss his trilogy of books on Stalin and Soviet foreign policy? I will make a note of that, certainly. Kristen Hanneson says, the construction of 50,000 flats in Pyongyang powerfully carried on as the top priority task of the historic 8th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea has been successfully concluded. Yes, I heard that. Yes. ACDT says the Tupac case is interesting considering how many federal agencies were around him and his record label. Yep, I have heard that there was a lot of surveillance going on around him. Alan says try to imitate Michael Brooks imitating Obama. Okay, further research needed. I'm surprised Waters made it to a ripe old age. Well, the thing you got to bear in mind about Waters is that he's become more radical with age. So like the things Waters was saying in the 70s and 80s, and he admits this himself, where the sort of boilerplate Anglo leftist stuff, which was in terms of his political opinions, which was equally directed or even more directed at the Soviet Union than it was against like American and British imperialism. Like Waters played a gig in celebration of the fall of the Berlin Wall. So let's not mistake this for anything other than what it is. Now he turns more radical as he gets older. He's now a regular listener to the Decline and Fall show, for instance. And so he's become more of an anti-imperialist in a coherent way. Now, he left a comment on one of our Decline and Fall shows a while back stating that he had to reassess Gorbachev now, and that he'd met Gorbachev and his wretched wife at some point. So I find that interesting. I think the reason why he's survived so long is partially because of that, because like he actually fitted into the sort of common opinions in the musical community for a long time, and only really turned decisively radical like in his late 60s, early 70s. So he's like 80 now, and now he's basically on his way to becoming some sort of communist. That's an interesting life. Where are we now? Almir says Tupac was very political. He potentially would have been like MLK. He probably would have dropped all the gangster BS and went all in against imperialism. Well, I've heard a lot of contradictory things about Tupac. One, that he was exactly as you say. The other, that he was basically an actor trying on various different personas. I've never really listened to much Tupac, to be completely honest. I'm kind of the right age to have been in that sort of age group, but I never really got into him. Like I was more into Public Enemy and Jurassic 5. That was and The Roots were the sort of my hip hop artists of choice way back in the day. Hobbs says Dylan could be compromised. Dylan's definitely compromised. I mean, that guy has had like more political personas than underpants. I mean, at certain points, he's like been a sort of rabid and open Zionist. He probably still is. But I still enjoy some of his albums. But my God, that man has not a single principled bone in his body. What do you think about Michael Jackson? Says Alan. He's got a legion of defenders online saying he was demonized on purpose. Well, look, with Jackson, I hate to use this line, but two things can be true. A, like there was clearly those in the power structure who were looking to get something on him and who were looking to disgrace him. That much is true, because the stuff he got up to, or was alleged to have got up to, was not out of, shall we say, step with what the rest of the Hollywood perverts were doing. And so the prosecution of him was clearly selective. Doesn't mean that he didn't do something rotten. It didn't do something dodgy. Now, with him, it's clear that he had like a terrible, abusive childhood, and he was fucked up. And fucked up and abused people can do fucked up things in their own way. So I don't know for sure either way. Certainly with Jackson, yes, it was selective, clearly selective, given what we know about what the rest of the fucking Hollywood crowd and the music industry gets up to. Going after him was clearly a choice somebody made for reasons I'm not sure of. I don't quite buy this idea that Jackson was some sort of like campaigner, because I think Jackson was a deeply damaged and very fucked up man who was left sort of mentally ruined by the cruelties inflicted upon him by his own father. Sid says, I honestly feel like Michael Jackson was character assassinated. Again, haven't researched it enough to give a clear opinion either way on that. Ever heard of Phil Oakes? Yes, I have. I listened to quite a bit of Phil Oakes back in the day. Okay. Yeah, Hobbs says Dylan had good politics during the 60s. Even in the 70s, he still wrote Hurricane. yeah, I mean, Dylan's never been boring, I got to say, except for perhaps with those live albums he did with the Grateful Dead, where all of them were so coked off their face that the music was barely discernible, you know. Okay, so I'm going to have to draw things to a close for this evening. We are recording a Decline and Fall episode tomorrow, so that will be out very soon. Going to be looking at the Labour Together, so we say, espionage campaign against the Grey Zone and others. So look out for that tomorrow. We'll be back again with another live stream on this channel on the day after tomorrow, so do be sure to join us for that one. But until then, I will say good night to you all, and I will see you again very soon.
Утренний стяг, в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, веют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы. Будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы. Милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути.